Okay, now you've seen how bias cut cloth works in, on a simple piece of fabric. Let's put it into a dress and actually make it happen. So I've actually got the same character here cloned, and they both have the exact same motion on them. And in this case, I've got a non-biased piece of cloth, a panel set up, a dress form that's already been set up the way I want. Now what I want to do is create a biased dress form so that the panels are not cut correct, or they're not cut on the bias, so to speak. So let's shift clone, and I'm going to call this a copy. This is going to be called a bias dress form. And as it is, let's actually go to the top view. In here, now what I'm going to do is go into spline subobject mode, and I'm going to let's actually get out of that mode, and I'm going to start rotating them. Of course, I'm going to do it locally. Let's get rid of that. So I can adjust these. Let's say they're cut on a 30-degree bias. So let's move that out a little bit. And again, I'm going to rotate and move it. Let's not take those. Again, 30 degrees. We're just going to set this up. Alright, so that's correct. Let's grab all four of them and pretty much center them up on this panel. Okay, so now I've got basically four panels all cut at 30-degree bias, so the cloth is going to react slightly differently than this one would. Okay, so the next thing that I want to do is select this panel, and if I go into vertex subobject mode, you can see I've already broken out all of the different things that I need. So I'm going to apply garment maker. Well, actually, no, I'm not. I'm going to delete that out. I'm going to follow my own advice, and in this case, I'm going to shift copy, and this time I'm going to make a reference. Call it ref. And on this one, I'm going to apply garment maker, because just like this one, I have a reference that's being used here. That way, if I need to tweak this panel, the pattern, so that it fits the character a little bit better, I can. So in this case, I am, let's see, this one is set to 1.3. So let's make sure that everything matches up. We'll do 1.3. So I get more density in the mesh. And now I can go into panel subobject mode. I'll select all of those. Let's go into shaded mode. And I'm going to rotate them all 90 degrees. And then I'm going to rotate each panel 30 degrees so that they are the way they need to be. So that they're all flush again. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to align them the way that had been done before. So I'll select this panel and I'll move it up. And I'm just going to put this into rough position. And so I'm going to rotate this panel and move him out a little ways. Okay, so I'm going to take these two panels, just like that guy, and I'm going to rotate both of them 180 degrees, And I'm going to do Shift K, or VK I should say, that shortcut key, so I can get to the back. And I'm going to move these panels roughly into place so that they are where I want them to be. Select them both, move them both forward. There we go. And so you're actually just seeing the workflow of setting up, a realistic piece of clothing here. Now I'll be doing something similar when I do pleats and seams later on, so this may get a bit tedious, but it never hurts to understand how this all works. So if I go to the front view, try and keep those fairly close as far as how they sit on the character. Let's go back to that. I'm going to move this around, and in this case I'm going to make it curved. And it's going to be like such. Actually, it's offset. That's not a good thing. So let's put this around the waist of the character. Okay. So now I can go ahead and start working on the seams. And in this case, let's turn on edged faces. And I'm going to select these seams, and I'm going to create a seam there between the darts. And I'll create a seam between those two. Create a seam there. Well, obviously I selected more. Create a seam. Create a seam there. Create a seam. Grabbed an extra one, obviously. There you go. You just got to keep kind of planning these things out. Create a seam. And one more, create a seam. Now, in order to connect pieces of cloth like this, and again I'll touch on it when I do the pleats and whatnot, but when you start developing clothing patterns where you've got the tops of pieces of clothing coming together with this, which is a waistband, you've got to be careful of how you do it. If you create a closed loop here, you can't connect it to this. It doesn't want to seam together, and if you have two closed loops, Cloth Effects, or Garment Maker I should say, doesn't know how to connect that. So you need to keep these basically contiguous panels, considering I've got all these sewing springs to connect everything from this seam edge all the way around to this one. Now I can go ahead and create a multi-segment that will connect correctly. So if I select that one, and that one, let's actually select that, not that. And so now I've got 8 top edges ready. I'll create multi-segment. Select that. Hit create seam. Oh, it's telling me that it's not in tolerance, so I'll boost that up quite significantly. Hit create seam. And so now I've got an edge. Of course, if I were to simulate this, it's going to fall off like a hospital dressing gown, which probably most of us fear more than death. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and close it up, make it a legitimate skirt. Let's see, I obviously selected something up front. You can always tell when you hit create seam and nothing happens, chances are you selected something through the garment or through the panels, and that's not a good thing. Okay, so now I've got Garment Maker assigned here and here. And at this point, now that I've got both of them set, let's go ahead and save as. And I'm going to call this